Everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. My name is Lynn York. I am the publisher of Blair. We're a nonprofit press. We're based in Durham, North Carolina. And I just want to welcome you again to the wonderful launch of The Baddest Girl on the Planet. We're just thrilled to have Buxton Village Books appropriately host this great event tonight. And we're just a few little housekeeping things first. I think Ariel has already let you know to go ahead and mute yourselves. Ariel Ibert is our Director of Operations at Blair. She's the person who knows how to do all of these wonderful technical things. She's going to be helping us tonight. And if you have any questions for Heather, please type them into the chat and Ariel will collect them and we'll be asking Heather later in the program. And we're hoping at the end, if there's time, we can also unmute people if you want to say hello or have another question. So we'll get started. This is the launch not only of this wonderful novel, but it's also the launch of the prize winner for the Lee Smith Novel Prize. This is a prize we give out at Blair once every 2 or 3 years. And Heather was an entrant in a pool of almost 200 novels that came to us a few years back. And the experience of going through these novels, I'll have to tell you, is something else. But what is the best thing is when you are reading along and you find a fresh new voice, someone you've never heard before, who is sparkling, who has some great things to say about life on this planet right now, and who does it with artfulness and humor, one of my favorite things. We were so delighted when we found this, and the year or so since then that we've spent working with Heather to put this book into production has been a real joy. And we're just so very proud to be the publisher of her debut. I'm going to hold up the book again because I think it's so beautiful. I am going to turn this over, though, tonight to Gee Gee Buxton. Gee Gee Rosell at Buxton Village Books. She is sitting now in front of a virtual picture of her wonderful bookstore. And right now you can access her books on buxtonvillage.com. No, it's buxtonvillagebooks.com. Is that correct, Gigi?
Yep, that's it.
And of course, she has a wonderful stock of The Baddest Girl on the Planet, all signed by Heather. So we really want to encourage you tonight to consider buying books and buying books from one of our most wonderful independent bookstores in North Carolina. So with that, I want to turn it over to Heather and Gigi.
Thank you, Lynn. I am overjoyed to be hosting Heather tonight. We have a very long relationship. Heather worked with us at Buxton Village Books in 2012. And since I have to tell a story on her, since I've been advertising the pending release of Baddest Girls, customers who remember her time with us remark how they always felt that Heather was truly interested in what they wanted to read and why they wanted to read it. Little did they know she was researching her book. But our story starts well before 2012. I'd known Heather as a customer for many years before that. I met her when she came camping with her mother, when Heather was just a young girl. So Heather, I'll let you tell everybody about your lifelong relationship with Hatteras Island.
Yeah, I could talk about Hatteras Island all day, so brace yourselves here for a minute. So yeah, we started going to Hatteras Island when I was little, I think 3. We would camp, and we camped in little tent campers with canvas sides that were musty and they flapped in the breeze, and kind of gradually went from the tiny one, I think it was a horse trailer, to ones that were a little bit bigger, but still just a little tent camper. And so by the time I was 10, I think Buxton Village Books opened in 1984. And it was just,
Yep.
Hatteras was my favorite place in the world. We would, it was just so special because it was just me and my family. And we would pack the camper bench full of books. Like, I think we took more books than anything else. And we would just go to the beach and read and hang out and make believe and pretend and do all the National Seashore Ranger activities and learn about all kinds of stuff and all kinds of stories. Like, it would just, so I guess in my mind, Hatteras and camping and the beach is kind of tied into myth and storytelling and narrative for me. So, but yeah, discovered the bookstore when I was 10. It's always just been my favorite place. And so we just sort of kept going there. My dad's ashes are scattered there. That's where he wanted to be buried. So that's kind of makes it even more of a special place that we need to go to every year. And then after college and grad school, and then second grad school, I was engaged in planning my wedding to be at Our Lady of the Seas in Buxton. And while we were down there, my fiance at that point had gotten, we were trying to get out of West Virginia and move someplace else. And he got an interview at the Inn on Pamlico Sounds Cafe Pamlico, which he was a chef at that point in time. And so I think it was about an hour before the wedding that he got the phone call to interview there. And so the day or two after the wedding, like, he went on the job and got the job, and we ended up moving down, which was really unexpected, but we just did it. We just left and did it and lived at the inn. And so we pretty much moved down there, immediately got pregnant, a little bit unexpectedly.
I remember that.
I thought it was going to take a long time. Didn't.
Oh, okay. I said, I don't think so.
No. And then also immediately there was Superstorm Sandy, and the road washed out and the bridges was out for weeks. And it was just an adventure of a year. I started working for Outer Banks this week, and I worked with Gee Gee, and I was working at the inn also. And I was editing and revising books, trying to still think of myself as a writer. And so, yeah, we lived there for a year. And then after Jonah was born, the baby, we ended up moving down to the mainland because of the sort of the seasonal employment was kind of difficult, and all kinds of practical adulty things like that. But we still make it back as much as I can. And it's just carries such a special place in my heart. And when I started writing kind of seriously in college, and one of our first assignments was to write, it was just a paragraph, maybe a page, descriptive setting. And so, of course, I said it at the campsite P68 at the Frisco National Seashore Campground. And I said it about this little girl spinning around on a sand dune, and another little girl comes in and meets her. And I named them Charlotte and Evie. And from that point, it was, I started writing more about Charlotte. I wrote about Charlotte's cousin. But like, those were the little girls that kind of captured my imagination, and I kind of just couldn't shake them. And so as I started writing more and more, I just kept being drawn back to Hatteras as a setting. And I think it just has so much, it has so much metaphorical content as a writer to draw from, because it's this place that's a barrier island. Like, it's not meant to stay in one place, much like life. Where, like, growing up in Ohio, I don't know, things tend to kind of stay put. Like, this is where this building is, and that's kind of where it stays. But when you're on Hatteras, you can see the beach changes every single day. The road is there, and then the road's not there. The lighthouse that you think of as this sort of beacon of stability had to be moved, and they just like sort of plucked it up and moved it along inland. It's just, all that just like really captured my imagination and made it one of the things I really wanted to write about. And so I don't think I'm done yet, honestly. Like, I feel like I just want to write maybe one more book set on Hatteras, have a trilogy. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from with with the island.
So are we going to hear more about Evie? Is that who comes next?
I don't know. Maybe. I just wrote something new for the first time. Well, not for the first time, but for the first time in a long time that feels really good, like that feels like alive. And I think it might be Evie. But the idea that I had, I tend to not write to a plot. The stuff when it seems to be working, it seems to be voice driven and character driven. And so I had an idea for a plot, which was going to be sort of multiple first person narrative I wanted Evie's mom to be one of the characters because I think she's interesting and I haven't explored her as much as I want to. But then when I started writing this new thing, it kind of maybe felt like Evie, but I don't want to say yes or no right now. I gotta wait and see.
Evie will let you know. She has a very strong voice, and if she has more to say, she will tell us. So what in The Baddest Girl is autobiographical? Are you Evie? Are you Evie's mom? Are you the island?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not Evie. She's way more interesting and fun than I am. She's like says and does things that I would only think about like weeks later after the event. If anybody, I'm probably more Charlotte, sort of nerdy and a little bit pretentious and bookish. But there's autobiographical, I don't know, I think we share the same sense of humor and sort of goofy way of looking at things. And just like, I don't know, the way I did kind of imagine how she felt about Hatteras though, but the parts of Hatteras that she loves, I like all that's from myself. And yeah, mostly just a sense of humor and maybe the quorkiness is the autobiography.
So Mike Tyson?
Never met Mike Tyson.
Where did you come from to join your book?
Well, I was having lunch with my friend Sarah from first grad school, and we were having one of those beautiful, like 3-hour long lunches at Red Lobster that you can have when you don't have kids. And we were just hanging out and talking, and somehow she got on the topic and she just said, she's like, yeah, Mike Tyson, he was the first man to disappoint me. And I was like, what? And she's started telling this story about how she grew up in northeastern Ohio and her like family lived next door to Don King, like really close to Don King, and he promoted Mike Tyson and they would train him there, and Mike Tyson would watch him do cartwheels and she thought he was great. And then, you know, later on he had a pretty serious downfall or two, and she just like, it was something sort of special to her that he had paid attention to her. He was like this big, you know, luminous sports star, watching her do cartwheels. And then when sort of she found out some of the not so good things that he had done, it really kind of she took it to heart. And like that just captured my imagination. Like, how does a little girl in Ohio meet Mike Tyson and Mike Tyson watches her do cartwheels? And I was like, Sarah, can I use that? And she said, yes, you can use that. And then I started writing it. I was like, this is happening to Evie. Like, this is going to happen to Evie.
And it's so real, you know, things and people are not what they seem. I mean, that was just, I loved that. I just love that. You know, you imagine something, you know, Truth and Beauty, we fall into that. And then the clay feet, and that was fantastic. So who is your favorite character?
Oh,
if you're not any one person, who is your favorite in your book?
Oh, it's a hard choice. Like, well, obviously Evie has to be the favorite, but she was so much fun to write. But yeah, her voice was just so compelling and interesting and funny. I just sort of didn't want to quit telling her stories. So of course she's my top choice, but for sort of secondary characters, I had a lot of fondness for Nate, Evie's brother, this time around. Just sort of getting more into his psyche and how he kind of worked. And then the other one that is sort of the most fun to write was Evie's Aunt Faye, who I think she only shows up in one chapter of this book, but she was kind of similar to Evie in a way, but she's just this, I don't know, she doesn't hold anything back, and super sort of funny in her own, definitely does things her own way. So she's probably my runner-up favorite.
All your characters are really strong. I really felt like I got to know them all as you introduced them and had them interacting. And I thought, I want to know these people. I want to be friends with them. Do they live in Trent? Do they live in Buxton? I need to go find them. Why have I not met them at the post office? They were just so real. But Baddest Girl, Evie's not a bad girl. Evie's a fabulous girl, but she judges herself so harshly in so many ways because she has such huge hopes and dreams, and then life. Yeah. So where did that idea come from?
Yeah, that was sort of multi-pronged as well, and kind of evolved along with the story. I kind of wanted to tell this story of a girl who gets a bad reputation. That happens to girls, and it's not fair and it's not right. Like, what do you do if this happens to you and you're living in this really small, tight community, which Hatteras is, it's a wonderful community. I've never seen any community that's so supportive of each other. But at the same time, like, it is small, like it's tiny. Like, when we moved to Raleigh, we talked about, we're like, it's so weird to see like different people at the grocery store. Like, you go to the store and it's like, it's always the same people because it's such a small place. So a lot, like everybody, it's like one giant family. So everyone knows what is going on with the other people. So if one girl got labeled as this, the bad girl, the slutty girl, she's not going to find that easy to escape in that situation. And I wanted her to bounce up against that a lot, in this notion of yourself and how she tries to sort of cast it onto Mike Tyson and make him kind of the culprit of it, but also how she comes to terms with it. And because she's not a bad girl. She's just, trying to navigate things and trying to figure things out. And it's just, I don't know, I thought like that was just an interesting dynamic to try to play with over the course of the book, of how she comes to terms with that and kind of redefines herself.
I thought it was fantastic. And popular literature doesn't often give the main female characters the opportunity within the story to bump up against judgment. And you really did that. Evie didn't quite ever wear that red cloak comfortably. She thought, well, I have this reputation. I'll call myself the baddest girl. But deep down inside, she just knew, stuff happens. And she was doing the best she could. So what do you feel about popular literature addressing these? I see, other women trying to write these stories, and sometimes they miss the voice. What do you think other women do with this particular thread out there?
Yeah, if I try to think about it, like, I don't know that could place another novel that's really, well, I mean, I'm sure there are some. It's just my failure of not reading them, but it felt like, if you consider, like, I don't know, I think about the genre too, like when you label things as women's fiction or you label it as literary fiction. And I feel like women's fiction has this sort of connotation of being a little bit lighter and fluffier and concerned with women's lives and women's issues. But if you do it in a way that, like, I was trying to have a good focus on description and overarching metaphor and like using all these literary tools, like, there's no reason why women's lives can't be this the focus of literary fiction as well. Like, I think the two can intersect, and I hope that's something I was trying to do here. Yeah,
it's something. It's definitely literary fiction.
Yeah.
And even though some authors don't like being pigeonholed as Southern, Southern is so rich, and I think, I mean, I have a cabinet in the bookstore, you know, it's
Yeah.
high praise in my world to be considered a Southern author. I mean, you know, you're right there on the shelf with Reynolds Price and Lee Smith and Jocelyn Jackson. And
Yes, they're amazing. Like I love Southern literature. Like it's always been my favorite. It's always been what I'm most drawn to read. And like again, it's just like it's such a rich tradition. And like, oh my gosh, yeah, I love everything about Southern literature. So to be considered kind of part of that milieu is really exciting.
I
I still can't believe my name gets, dropped in with Lee Smith and
You've earned your place. So move back and forth in time in order to build Evie's character when she's reflecting on things. We go where she's thinking.
Yeah.
What's up with that structure?
Yeah, I just think it's really fun when you get sort of this little clip of a story, and then later on in the book you get the whole story kind of exploded a little bit more. And part of it was just sort of me playing around at the beginning, and then as I realized this was going to be a big project, I just thought of ways to I just really was set on not telling it chronologically for whatever reason. I just thought it would be so much more interesting to kind of go back and forth, almost like stream of consciousness, but not hopefully a way that's easy to follow. But I was trying to make connections and link things a little more thematically together. So it was sort of these waves coming together of these different aspects of her personality. And I wanted to do these little kind of small turning points in, because I think of it also as a coming of age story, but not sort of coming of age when you turn 18, but kind of coming of age into your adulthood, which I'm hoping, maybe Evie's still working on it, but hopefully at the end of the book, she's come to some kind of sense of being comfortable with herself and confident in herself and her decisions. So I wanted to explore those little turning points where each one might not have been this great, a huge story, but put together. These are the little turning points that sort of define someone's character, and how, something that happened when you're 9 can impact something that happens when you're 19, and how those things sort of relate together.
So before we leave the topic of Baddest Girl and go on to Heather's philosophy of writing in life, how did you come up with the title of Baddest Girl? Okay,
yeah, so that was a play on Mike Tyson's nickname is the baddest man on the planet, and he's a kind of recurring theme in the book. She meets him when she's young, and he disappoints her, and then she kind of links his the downfall of his reputation to hers. So throughout the book, it's kind of like, Mike Tyson, man. So he's the baddest man on the planet. And so I always wanted to title one of the little chapters or vignettes. I wanted to title it The Baddest Girl on the Planet, like each of the chapters kind of, and it never fit right. And I couldn't figure out what to do with that. And then my friend Jen, who's on here now, who's sort of my codependent writing soulmate. We share everything, and we have since first grad school. But it was her idea. She's like, why don't you title that for the whole collection? And I was like, yep, that's what has to happen. That's the title for the whole collection. Like, that's the novel.
That's great. That's great.
And I love it. Like, it works.
Oh yeah, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Did this collection start out as a book, or did it start out as short pieces, or did you know it was going to be a book? Or
I started it as I wanted to do something short. And I did the Kid Dynamite, and then I did one more, and then I did one more. Stuff just kept happening to Evie that I wanted to write about, and from that point, I like about 3 or 4 in, I realized they were not short stories. It was going to be chapters, and it was going to be a novel. And so from that point, I started writing. But I also, I just still strongly felt that it wasn't going to be this straight chronological telling. So I kept it as sort of these uh, almost, but not quite standalones. Because at that point, I definitely knew this wasn't a couple short random pieces, but I wanted it to hang all together like and be a novel. Um, so they don't they all related to each other. And at that point, I started to write them um, still a little more self-contained and a little more in the vein of a story, but knowing that it was going to be part of a bigger project and be a chapter instead of a something that would hang by itself.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay, that makes sense. Um, so the voice that is talking to you now that you're not sure is Evie.
Mhm.
Um, do you think that's part of a collection? Do you think that's part of the next book? Or is that just something that's been stuck in there that you have to write down before you get on to?
Yeah, I don't know yet. I don't think it's something short. I think it's probably the start of the next big project, but it's also not the next big project that I had planned. But also, whenever I try to write things that I have planned out, like in a linear fashion, it's usually pretty crappy. So sometimes they just have to follow the voice and the not knowing. Like I was complaining to Jen, the same Jen of the title. I was like, why can't I just lay out a plot line and write it to the plot? Like I had it kind of laid out in my head how I wanted to do this thing, and I just try to do it, and it just seems stale. But then this one thing happens, and I start writing a scene about it, and it feels kind of more alive. Sometimes just have to follow that and see what happens. But I turns out I'm not really good at writing super short things. Tend to be drawn more to the long form. So I guess we're gonna have to wait and see.
So, if you were advising other novice writers that don't even really quite know where to start, they're just, hearing the voice and
Mhm.
making notes, what would you say to them, considering that you've just said, you tried this, but it ends up being that?
Yeah.
Would you say go with it? Would you say hold back? You need, what would you say?
Hmm. Well, if it's a novice writer, I think a whole lot of learning to be a writer is learning your own process and your own way of doing things. And there's so many different ways of doing it, and not one of them is right and not one of them is wrong. And lots of people can like blast through the shitty first drafts and go back and revise it and revise it and revise it. And that's just a way that people do it. And a lot of people can have a plot line and have everything up on their wall and look at it and write the scene and write this scene and write this scene. And that's how they work. And that's like, if that's your strength and that's what you need to play to. So I think a lot of it is just figuring it out. Like the shitty first drafts never really worked for me because I'm super recursive and slow. And so I write a paragraph or a sentence and go back and read it through and, edit it while I'm reading it to get the flow again, and then read it again and write a new sentence and go back to the beginning and read it again and write a few more sentences and go back and read it again and edit along the way and, write a few more. So that's just kind of, it took a while for me to learn that that's how I work too. And it's just like a matter of figuring that out. So I'll just guess I would counsel them to kind of do what feels right and just sort of feel it out along the way. And who knows, just sort of figure out what your strategy is and what works for you.
Well, what works for me right now is to hear you read from your own book in your own voice and tell us why you chose what you're going to read to us.
Okay. Awesome. So I picked, I know we've talked a lot about how the book is not linear, but for this reading, I chose to do it linear. So I'm going to start when Evie is 9 years old. And to set it up, let's see. Yeah, Evie's 9 years old. It's 1999. So the Cape Hatteras lighthouse is being moved inland to get away from the ocean. So Evie and her brother Nate are living with their Aunt Faye in her camper. They're staying at the National Seashore Campground in Frisco. Evie and Nate's parents are having some difficulties. Evie's mom has just left to go live with a lighthouse mover named Bob. So Evie, Aunt Faye, and Nate have, they've just kind of gotten kicked out of the National Seashore Campground because you can only stay there for 2 weeks at a time. And they've moved to the sort of more upscale Frisco Woods. And Evie has just sort of failed at making friends with some kids who look like they came out of an LL Bean catalog. So a couple random things to make this make sense. Evie sometimes pronounces her name like it's 2 letters, E-V, even though she knows it's wrong. And Jack is Evie's imaginary dog. So this is just a little short clip of Evie when she's little. My dad comes to visit us at Frisco Woods that night, but he doesn't play with me or even talk much. Mostly he sits around at the stand-up takedown table with Aunt Faye and drinks beer. His face is all prickly, and I wonder if he's going to grow a beard like Bob. He doesn't come the next night, but he comes back the next. He talks with me a little bit then. He drinks beer and says, "Evie, come tell your old man a story." So I sit on his lap and tell him all about how Jack and I barely escaped some pirates on the beach today, and how Jack was braver than that dog Brandy and Taffy of Torpedo Junction, even if Jack didn't fight any Nazis. I'm leading up to my big question of can I get a dog when my dad pats my head. He says, "Nazis are the least of our worries right now, kiddo." "I told you we didn't fight Nazis," I say. "We fought pirates." Dad hugs me and rocks me back and forth. His beard prickles the top of my head. It itches, but I don't move. "Do you need some warm fuzzies?" I ask him. He doesn't answer, just squeezes me tighter in his arms. I'm all squished, but I don't say anything. I sit on Daddy's lap until he has to go home. The next day, Aunt Faye says enough time's gone by for the rangers to not have burrs up their butts so we can go back to the National Seashore Campground. I go search for the catalog kids to tell them goodbye because my mom says always be polite, but their fancy RV is gone. I'm glad we're leaving. I hate it here at Frisco Woods. The sea oats aren't green anymore. They're gold and fluffy and better for hiding behind. I find new trails in the woods around the campground all the time. My legs have scratches from the yapon bushes, but I don't mind. Scratches aren't true dangers. While I walk, I hatch schemes to get me and Nate back home with Mom and Dad. So far, it has not worked to pretend to have malaria, say that I forgot stuff, even if it's vital to my education, get Dad to call Mom by being bad in his presence, either by stealing cigarettes or acting like I'm about to smoke them, or by hitting Nate in the face, or trying to get Aunt Faye's camper to fall on my leg to prove it's an unsafe environment. That camper won't fall for anything. I'm hiking today through the deepest jungles of South America, or wherever it is they crashed in Swiss Family Robinson. It is so hot. Even though it's 5 o'clock, it's so hot the air burns in my lungs. Parrots squawk in the trees and a monkey cries out, "Ooh, ooh, ah, ah, eh, eh." I swashbuckle some branches out of my way, and then, right before my eyes, I see a girl. And this girl is naked. She's about my size, and she has hair that's even longer than mine, and she's spinning in a circle. Her red gold hair flies out behind her like a sheet. I step out of the jungle. "Why are you naked?" I ask the girl. She jerks her head toward me fast and covers up her chest with her arms. Then she bends down to pick up a pink striped towel and wraps it around herself. She pushes her hair out of her face. "I was waiting for a bath," she says. "I never take baths," I tell her. "I find them boring." The girl bends down and picks up some shells. "Why are you in our campsite?" "I was hiking through the jungle," I say. I go look at the shells she's collecting. I show her what's wet. I don't mean to brag, but I'm good at identifying shells. Coquina, clamshell, Scotch bonnet. She says she wants to find a sand dollar, and I tell her the story of Jesus that goes in a rhyme about sand dollars. She looks impressed. "I'm Charlotte," the girl says. "Evie," I say. Then I smooth it out and say it right again. "Evie Austin." A little boy plods through the sand to where I am. He's got short legs to plow through all that sand. "Mom says it's your turn," he says to Charlotte. He's cute, maybe 4 years old. I want a little baby brother with short legs. "This is my brother, James," Charlotte says. She points at me. "That's Evie," she says to James. Then Charlotte runs down the dune to take her bath. I take a shower that night and wash my hair. Then I make Aunt Faye comb it out nice and put it in braids. I eat my supper fast and dash back up to where my trail comes out at Charlotte's campsite. I clear a fine patch of sand and hunker in. Charlotte's dad wears his bathing suit from the beach and no shirt, and he laughs and talks to Charlotte's mom. Charlotte's dad grills hamburgers and shoos away seagulls, while Charlotte's mom cooks things on the camper stove and walks in and out, setting the picnic table. Her mom laughs and shrieks when the napkins blow away, and Charlotte runs around gathering them up. Then Charlotte sets things on each of the 4 napkins, a salt shaker on her own, a pepper shaker on James's, a big stabbing fork on her dad's, and a can of soda on her mom's, so nothing blows away. For dinner, Charlotte's family has hamburgers, a nice salad, green beans, whole grain buns because whole grains are good for you, juice or milk, you get your choice, or soda for Charlotte's mom, but nobody else. A dessert out of a box. Charlotte's little brother, James, is so cute. He's got blonde hair that sits just right on his head, but not like the Frisco Woods bull-headed boy. He wears itty-bitty flip-flops, not tennis shoes. He swings his legs under the picnic table and asks for more green beans. Who ever heard of a little kid asking for more green beans? I spy there for quite a while, then I slink back down to our campsite, unseen. A few minutes later, along come Charlotte and James. Charlotte's holding James's hand. Ask your mom if you can come for a walk, Charlotte calls to me. I glance at the camper. Aunt Faye is inside, but I don't feel like asking permission. Besides, she's not my mom. I can, I say. We all go for a walk as the sun sets and the Frisco National Seashore Campground turns a soft gold color. Me and Charlotte each hold one of James's hands. He swings between us like a South American monkey. That's that.
So I see several people have questions for you while you were reading. I'm going to bounce it to Ariel and she can moderate the questions. Should we get some of our viewers involved?
Yeah, so we do have a few questions from the chat. Our first question is kind of a two-part. This comes from Rebecca Cuthbert. The first question she has is, if there, Evie had a baby before Heather did. Did going through Evie's fictional pregnancy and early mom years prepare her in any way for her own experiences?
Yeah, kind of actually. Yeah, I wrote Evie's pregnancy and postpartum experience before I had kids. And so I kind of, I knew she was gonna get pregnant her first semester in college. I have to move back home, decided to keep the baby. And I knew that wasn't going to be easy. So that's like, if anyone's going to have some postpartum issues, it's going to be poor Evie. And so I emailed like two of my good friends who had babies. And I was like, okay, guys, you got to tell me the real deal here. Tell me the true story, because I didn't know. And so they kind of told me, like, I was like, tell me the nitty gritty. And so they did. And I used a lot of that stuff, and I just kind of imagined it. But as it turns out, I could have added so much more when I actually experienced it for myself. But it's at the same time, it kind of like, I got it right. Like I got like the stuff my friends told me were definitely sort of part of the issues that come into play when you first have your brand new baby. So in a way, it did prepare me. Yes.
Right. And that practice run in the fictional setting and all that research you did with your friends, you know, I'm interested to hear maybe what other kind of research you did secondarily through friends or other writers.
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, I pretty much like, I always have a tab open, 3, 4, 5 tabs open on my computer when I'm writing, because I'm constantly referencing things. So I did the most random research. I did a lot of research into the sex lives of lobsters for one of the chapters. Learned way more about lobsters than I needed to. Learned, of course, the moving of the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse. I had to research that to make sure I had everything right. What else? The lobsters was probably the most random thing. And then I would just have stuff open about Hatteras all the time, just to reference sort of visually something that I was trying to describe, or I had a really clear spot of where, what neighborhood on Hatteras that I wanted her little white house to be in, and what I wanted to look like, and what road it was on. And so I would open up the maps and make sure I had it located right in my imagination. So things like that. But yeah, definitely the lobsters. Those were the most interesting thing.
Well, we'll expect your lobster TED Talk coming later in 2021. So the second part of Rebecca's question was, would you talk about the importance of believing in your own work? How to uphold that faith in the challenging world of submissions and publishing?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge part of it. And that's, gosh, believing in your own work. it's tricky because you go through these workshops in graduate school for years and years and years. And I was really lucky. I never had a really terrible one where they just sort of rip you apart for the sake of ripping you apart. Like I always sort of had the sense that my peers were genuinely, offering helpful critique to make the work better. And along the way, you find people whose aesthetic doesn't kind of help yours out, and you find people that it really does, and you match with and you mesh with really well. And those are the people you tend to rely on more along the way. So that's kind of a big part of it, is believing in yourself, is finding your sort of core group of people who also believe in you, like no matter what. And I am kind of lucky to have found those people, and I'm still in touch with them for however many years it's been since first grad's going on 15 years. So yeah, it's for people who don't know what the process is like to get a book out there, it's really brutal. You get lots and lots and lots and lots of rejection along the way. And at some point, either, I don't know, I just sort of stubbornly kept believing in Evie's voice and her story, despite, any practical evidence to the contrary. Partly because of the support that I had from that core group of people, but also just like, I don't know, I just really love this story. And it, like, whenever I would go back and try to make it better and try to make it better, edit it again, it would make me laugh. And like, I kind of was writing things that I like to read. And so yeah, I just sort of kept submitting it places. And along the way, there's just enough close, like, near misses and kind and positive rejections. And we really, really like this, just not quite enough to publish it. So there was enough of that I figured it wasn't terrible, and it wasn't just me kind of being unrealistic. So yeah, I really hit a roadblock after kids with writing and submitting things. I wrote this, mostly during my time at West Virginia and shortly after it. So it was done by the time I moved to the beach. And then I was just editing it and kind of polishing it up and trying to get it out there. And then had kids and kind of got swept into an undertow there for a while. But I still kind of, like, one thing I could do was, because writing new things was really hard, but one thing I could do was to keep submitting things, because that's it's still time intensive and expensive, but it's something I could do in shorter bursts. And so I kind of kept sending it out places, and I got one near miss. And then when I saw the Lee Smith Novel Prize, like, Lee Smith is my kind of like favorite. She's my favorite ever, like my favorite author. And Blair was had been the publisher of Taffy of Torpedo Junction that I read about there. That was my favorite book when I was a kid, and it was John F. Blair was the publisher. And so that was like, oh, well, I have to send to that one. And it's sort of like, I don't know, and it happened in some of the other smaller presses that I sent to him. Like, if it doesn't fit here, it's not going to fit anywhere. And so, like, the Lee Smith Novel Prize at Blair, I was like, well, I have to send to that. And so I, like, really quickly, I think I was maybe a day ahead of the deadline of when I needed to submit it. And I just, like, quickly glanced things over again and polished it. And I changed Aunt Faye's name at the last second when we were editing it. I was like, Robin found a couple mentions of the old name, and I was like, oh, did I change that? I did it last second. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do it for this one. But anyway, just kind of like submitted it, and like that was that, kind of forgot about it for a while, and thought, well, if it doesn't hit here, I'm going to tear it apart and start over again, maybe do it chronologically. But like, luckily it won, so I got to keep it how I wanted it to be. That was a long answer, sorry.
Not at all. And that's actually a good segue into what I think will be our last question from the chat for now. This comes from Heather Bell Adams, another debut novelist, I believe, in the room here. She says, I'd love to hear more about this editing as you go along process, and also how the manuscript changed throughout the revision and editing stages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's just kind of how it ended up working for me. As like when I started out writing, like in college, like the first, when I'm just learning, I would try to imagine like the whole story in my head before I would write it down. And I kind of couldn't do it any other way. So that never really worked. It kind of worked, but I just sort of realized like to sort of get myself to that state of flow, like you have to get into that flow where things are just kind of like working and you're not overthinking things kind of. I had to kind of constantly have the words running through my head and to get a feel for the rhythm of things. And yeah, so it just at some point it clicked that this is just sort of how I do it. Like you just, I don't know, you get an idea and you write something and then I get to where I'm stuck. Like I'm stuck and I can't move it forwards. So you go back to the beginning and read it down, and then it kind of comes, reading it, you kind of feel what needs to happen next, and you write that down and then get stuck again, go back to the beginning. And then like while I'm going through it and while I'm going back from the beginning, if something doesn't sound right or doesn't feel right, I kind of like tweak it as I go. So by the end of a page has been edited, who knows, 100 times as I've been writing it.
It seems as though while the book itself is nonlinear, neither is your editing process. I've seen this great drawing of the editing process. Everyone thinks it's a straight line. You start at the beginning and then you write and then you get to the end at some point. That's just not it. It looks more like a picture of a plate of spaghetti with just, these tangles and loops. And I love that answer, Heather. Gee Gee, do you have any questions, or are we ready to hear maybe a little more from Evie now?
Yeah. How about reading for us again another passage? Do you have one all queued up?
I got one queued up. This one's a little bit longer, but this one is actually from the very first chapter of the book. So I don't know if I need to do any setup to make it make sense, because hopefully it makes sense kind of right off the bat. But this chapter is called Kid Dynamite, and it takes place in 2013. My husband is not the first man to disappoint me. That honor goes to Mike Tyson, who I met the summer I was 9, the summer I left Hatteras Island to stay in Ohio for 2 weeks with my Ohio friend, Charlotte. Charlotte and I became friends while her family was camping on the Outer Banks, and I was allowed to take a sort of reverse vacation to the hills of Ohio. Charlotte's family lived in a pretty white 2-story house with blue shutters and dollops of woodworking around the front porch. I still think about that house and those green, green hills, about how every day seemed green and blue and gold. But maybe that's just how every day feels when you're a kid. Oh, hang on. I got my thing out of order. Oh my word. It's all out of order. Okay, sorry. Charlotte lived next door to Don King, and at that time he promoted Mike Tyson, along with a bunch of other guys, who all trained in tents in his backyard. Every day, Charlotte and I would gather up our friends Sarah M. and Sarah N. and make the boxers watch us turn cartwheels. They would stop their jump roping and shadow boxing to look at us and applaud, just like they really cared. When I got home, I bragged about Mike Tyson to all my friends. I was the toast of the 4th grade for an entire school year. Then Mike Tyson raped a girl. Real quick, I stopped saying he was my best friend, but kids don't forget things like befriending rapists. This did not help my social standing. Little girls who are best friends with rapists rarely remain popular. Except for Charlotte, who got off the hook because everyone in her town thought Mike Tyson was a good guy. Still, Charlotte and I stayed close, partly because I didn't have many other friends. And then, a few years later, just when I thought my Tyson-induced social pariah status had begun to blow over, he bit Evander Holyfield's ear off. I never mentioned Mike Tyson to anyone again. My husband is not the second man to disappoint me in my 23 years on this planet, not the third or the fourth, so by the time his disappointments start to really roll in, you'd think I'd be braced for them. You'd think his metaphorical ear biting would not come as a complete and total shock. You'd think I'd be prepared for it when Stephen says, "Evie, we need to sell the house," but I'm not. "What do you mean sell the house?" I say. It's morning and the light slices down through my window into my crazy, cozy little kitchen where I spend so much time boiling and baking and basting as a way to breathe. My house is not big and dollopy, and it does not have a front porch, and there's not a bit of gingerbread trim anywhere, but it's white and snug and bright and mine. I think of the morning after we moved in, when Stephen and I sat on the floor and laughed about owning 6 blenders. Stephen leans against the counter like he hasn't a care in the world. Casual. He eats a bagel. He's wearing khaki pants, and I wonder if he's going into work at his father's store today. I was talking to Royce Burris at your office when I picked you up the other day. He said we could get a good sum for the property, he says. I squeeze out a dish rag and wipe at the kitchen table, looking down and hoping that Stephen doesn't see my face color at Royce's name. I have a tiny crush on Royce. I take a second and listen to the loud commercial blasting from the living room where my son Austin is watching TV. But where would we live? I'm not saying it's a perfect plan, Stephen says. He crosses the kitchen and sits down in front of me at the table. But we could stay with your folks or mine until the cash clears and then build somewhere. I sit down. This sounds like an okay plan. This sounds thought out and maybe even mature. But I know Stephen's teeth are awfully close to my ear. Stephen links his fingers together and makes them into a steeple. We could build on the mainland. It'd be a hell of a lot cheaper. And there it is. He wants to leave the island. Chomp. Maybe if you got an actual job, we wouldn't be so strapped that we have to sell our home, I say. I lean forward on the table and my arms get sticky from the damp dish rag. Stephen's mouth tightens. It's an old argument and it goes like this. I say, get a job. He says, I'm staying at home with Austin. I say, you're never home with him. And I know this because I drop him off at my parents' every day before I go to work while you fuck around on your jet ski. He says, I'm above working any jobs on this island. He doesn't say it in exactly those words, but that's what he means. And that's what he honestly, truly believes. But it's not below me to answer phones and make coffee and peddle beach houses to tourists every day because I'm just that low. He believes this too. I know it. Stephen crosses his arms and the sunlight glints off his watch. I have a job, he says. Part-time stock boy for your father doesn't count, I say. He works in the back where no one can see him and does it out of obligation to his father who basically gave us this house. Stephen shakes his head. God damn it, Evie, he says. Austin can hear you, I say. He can't hear a fucking thing over that goddamn TV. But Stephen lowers his voice all the same. I don't know why you let him watch it so much. I stand up. You're the stay-at-home father. Why don't you monitor him? I cross to the living room where Austin sits on his knees, entranced by Go Diego Go. My son is small and dark-haired, and I'm always a bit thankful that he looks like me. Come on, kid, I say, reaching down to pull him up from under his armpits. Time to go to grandma's. Austin has the charming habit of kicking the passenger seat on our daily rides up the island to drop him off at my parents' inn. I guess if I was strapped down in a car seat, I'd kick too, but it doesn't ease my annoyance. And I am strapped down, come to think of it, with my own seatbelt. How about you cut that out, buddy? I say. I glance in the rearview mirror, but Austin's looking away. I want to hear the Hollaback song, he says, and I die a little inside. Every day he wants to hear Hollaback Girl. This was cute at first until he started singing, I ain't no harlot snack girl. And I had to correct him over and over so people don't think my kid knows about harlots, even though I know he has no idea what it means. He wants it every day. Every day we drive up the same road and listen to the same song. And I think of Charlotte saying that you can't get lost on an island because pretty soon you'll drive off the end. And right now I want to drive off the end. But I pop in the cassette I've recorded from my dad's old stereo and think about how Stephen goes jogging every morning with his iPod. And then I make myself think about how I want Austin to grow up with a family, with a mom and a dad in a little white house that once held 6 blenders, a little white house that Stephen wants to sell. The morning is bright and sunny for February, and the Pamlico Sound spreads out in shades of blue and gray and green as Highway 12 passes close to the water. Austin kicks the seat in time to the music. I fumble for my sunglasses and sing along with Gwen Stefani. I would not be the first person in my marriage to have an affair. I think about this as Royce Burris walks in the front door of his office, the little bell jangling his presence. Royce is easily in his 50s. His hair is brown and thin, and he has a small, rounded gut. I find this endearing. I want to rub it like a Buddha belly. I debate whether it would be too forward to tell him so. Royce, I say, you are one sexy son of a bitch. Let me rub your belly. Royce looks startled, yet pleased. This is a notch up from our normal morning routine. Usually, I tell him he's a beast, and he says I look nice in whatever I'm wearing. Royce crosses over to where I sit at the receptionist's desk, puts down his briefcase, and shrugs off his jacket. He smells like the outdoors, and his hair is tousled. Royce props an arm on the tall desk. How's my sunshine today, he asks. I feel the familiar zing at his closeness, the stir in my belly and warmth in my face. I think about what it would be like to touch his arm. I'm mad at you, I say. I pout up my mouth in a way I hope is cute and sexy. Are you now? He says. His eyes crinkle and he doesn't look concerned. Why'd you go and tell my husband we should sell our house? Royce walks around the back of the desk to stand beside me, and I spin in my chair to look at him. I was just bullshitting with him, Royce says. He draws his eyebrows together. I find this endearing too. Does he seriously want to sell? I cross my arms. Anyone who got that house would just knock it down and build a monstrosity. And they would too, a pastel McMansion monstrosity. I'm sorry, Royce says. Didn't mean to put a bug in his ear. Royce reaches out his hand, and I think he's going to touch my face, and my heart pounds. But then he just smooths his hair and puts his hand back down. I try to breathe. Get yourself to your office, I say. The tourists need you. Royce gathers up his stuff and walks down the hallway. He turns, walks a couple backward steps and says, I'll make it up to you, Cupcake. And I just bet he will. That's all.
So do we have any questions from any of our viewers about that passage or anything else? You can throw them up in the chat and Ariel will see them and hop in.
Yeah.
So I felt like in the first chapter, I really got to know Evie right off the bat and wanted to be a friend with her. She just, a gal with so many layers of personality and deep thought, even though she was living, you know, the middle of the road job she didn't love, a child she adored, a husband she was putting up with, you know, just the story of a young life that could go either way, completely off the rails, or they could sort it out. Why did you choose to put that chapter first?
Yeah, that was the first thing that I had written, and it was the first thing that captured me. I really wanted to figure out the story of how she got that divorce and how things broke down between them. And I wanted to, once the Mike Tyson stuff came in, I wanted to add that in, like metaphorically, like the fighting and what it means to be bad and all of that into kind of the story of Evie's divorce. And then I just wanted to open at a point where she's making kind of really bad decisions and maybe not the most grown up ways of dealings with things. She's super funny and super smart, and she's super just torches that marriage and burns it to the ground and doesn't deal with things in a mature way. So I wanted to give her a point to come of age from. So even though she's an adult in that story, that chapter, that that portion in time, she's not making really good grown-up decisions, and so I wanted to put that sort of that breakdown as the beginning, and she ends that chapter in kind of a not very upbeat place. So I wanted her to be able to grow from there, because I wanted it to do like this coming of age story into your adulthood. So even though it's starting when she's technically a grown-up, I wanted her to be able to grow from that point.
Well, it worked. It's great. Ariel, I see some questions there, and then maybe folks just want to hop on and say hi.
Yeah, we don't have any more questions, just praise and comments at how charming Evie is and how they love all these rich details in the story. And can't wait for more. We do have a very specific comment that I did want to share. Sarah Saunders says, I just love her relationship with Roy, Evie's relationship with Royce. Reminds me a little bit of Derek and Garcia from Criminal Minds.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you everyone for your comments and for your thoughtful questions and for coming to our launch for the Baddest Girl on the Planet. Before we sort of wrap things up, if you do want to stick around after we sort of finish up and say hello and chat with Heather and Gee Gee, please feel welcome. again, thank you from all of us at Blair, who are so proud to publish this wonderful book. And please support Buxton Village Books, who is actually undergoing renovation. So you'll need to get your signed copies from buxtonvillagebooks.com. Okay, there's a link at the top of the chat, and I'll put that in there again while we're wrapping things up and while Gigi thanks everybody too. Thank you.
It has been wonderful. Heather, it makes me miss you so much.
Yes, me too. So beach homesick. Every now and then it hits like a wave of it. Like I need to get to Hatteras. Let's see. Like I need to get down there.
Everyone will be traveling soon. It won't be much longer. We're
Not much
getting this
longer, right?
pandemic under control. We're moving forward, and then you'll be here.
Yes.
So I want to hear you give a shout out to your kids and husband.
Yes. Yeah, so
I know they're just as excited as they can be.
Yeah, they're pretty pumped. I wrote something here that I was going to read in the beginning, and then I kind of got sidetracked. I don't know where it went. I was going to say thank you to everybody. It's just been such a joy working with everyone from Blair, like Robin and Lynn and Ariel especially, have been kind of my point people. And I just had like the best experience with them for a first time novelist. Like it was just really wonderful to work with them. And a shout out to my husband, Jose, who stayed up till 4 a.m. working on my website and, supported us throughout this, and Jonah and Hannah and Jordy, who are all very excited and made cards and talk about mommy's book, help me take videos of opening boxes and stuff. And my mom, I don't know if she ever made it back on or if she's going to watch the recording, and my brother and my cousins, and all my good friends. Like everyone has been just so supportive and believing in me through all of this, even when, you go years without something hitting, and who knows, like, I don't know if it was ever going to get published. And, but their kind of belief in me and support is sort of one of the things that floats you along and keeps you believing in yourself. So thank you, everyone. I love you very much.
Thank you.
And I want to say thank you
Go ahead, Gigi.
to Blair Publisher too. They're a great crew to work with.
They've been so fun and supportive. Like I always so supportive with them, and they all understood what it's like to do this with kids. Like there
you go. Yes, they're definitely a professional crew. They know their stuff.
Well, we appreciate that. And thank you again for both of your time tonight, ladies, Gigi and Heather. It was a wonderful evening.